Hmm. 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 Ah, good. Hello, Peter.
Hey, George. We're on you live on you.
We are live on YouTube, and looks like we are so far free of technical glitches. But thank you so much, everybody who's already joined us. Really very sorry about what happened last week, and very grateful again to all of our gagglers who stayed on waiting an hour for us to rectify the technical issues. So really appreciate it. So thank you again. So Peter, how are you?
All right. I mean, it was a shitty day. Okay. The weather, you couldn't decide if it was going to rain or snow. It was something in between. So is really awful. But I got the dogs out 4 times, so it was enough.
Okay. So the dogs don't mind. I guess the dogs don't mind this kind of weather.
Oh, they do.
They do.
Yeah. They're so pampered. Okay. They do what they do, and they look at me like, are we staying here or what? Okay.
Well, like I say, they don't exactly have very warm fur, that protects them from the cold. So it's like, therefore they do feel the cold.
Chihuahuas feel the cold. Oh,
Yeah,
big time. They like warm weather a lot. But so to answer your question, it was just one of those mediocre late winter days that it's very unpleasant to be outside.
All right. So anyway, I mean, the Munich Security Conference got underway, I guess, yesterday, and today we had a number of bloviations of hot air from a number of professionals in bloviators, such as Boris Johnson, who gave an absolute embarrassment of an address, But Kamala Harris also gave an appalling performance. Stoltenberg, he's never going to be left out of things. He gave a speech. Ben Wallace, the UK defense minister, said he can't come to Munich because he's so fixated on what's going on in Ukraine. But apparently Zelensky, no one told him that something terrible is about to happen. So Zelensky showed up in Munich, but Ben Wallace is in London. I guess he's looking at it through his binoculars to see what's going on.
It's really quite amazing, you know, Zelensky. I mean, obviously, the reason we went there is to press the flesh, obviously, okay, because he's been so marginalized through all of this. And I think he's just telling people, you know, in between the buffets, he said, you know, you guys are trashing my economy. I mean, planes are not going down there because of security reasons. Bank transfers are being stopped for security reasons. I mean, you know, with friends like that, I mean, you don't need enemies. You don't need an invasion, okay? And the Ukrainian economy doesn't do well at the best of times.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And then all these embassies that have now moved from Kiev to Lvov, that's a real problem because, again, all it does is create panic. So you're not exactly doing anything to fortify the Ukrainians, you know, our most loyal allies in the world, the Ukrainians. All you're doing is causing panic. You know, you're running in a very undignified manner from Kiev, very undignified, very pathetic. While I'm telling them, actually, we're not going to be here to fight on your behalf. You know, you can forget that. But we're here, you know, we moved you know, several hundred miles westward so that we can scarper even more quickly than we scarpered from Kiev. I mean, it's really quite contemptible.
I think they're confused. I think they got they have the first letter right, K. Yeah, but I think they're thinking about Kabul. Maybe I'm wrong here. It just, you know, Tony Blinken and Joe Biden and all, you know, that was half a year ago. Okay, more than that. Okay, so you're evacuating the wrong city.
Right. Now I was thinking, you know, Olaf Scholz today made some a comment that the idea of this genocide taking place in the Donbass, he said, is laughable. Now, I actually think it is, you know, very bad whenever you use the word genocide. You should just simply stay away from that word. I mean, it's such an extreme word that you really want to just leave that one aside. So you don't want to just use it promiscuously. But that's one thing. On the other hand, there's something about Germans saying, you know, oh, this is hilarious or whatever that is really obnoxious. And you can see that he's really rubbed the Russians the wrong way. Like, Germans are just better shut up. I mean, that's generally the go-to position for any German. Just shut up. You know, just tell them that, yeah, we make wonderful cars and you know, electric races are the best in the world. Yeah, that's good. But when you start getting into genocide, war crimes, human rights, then people's hackles really go up.
Well, I mean, he could have taken necessity from taken virtue from necessity and saying that we of all people know what ethnic cleansing is all about, and you know, and that's what I think by any metric that is what has happened and is what is happening in the Donbass. I mean, who are the most willing killers? It's these battalions, okay, that have been given the green light from Kiev. I was just watching a clip from Jimmy Dore, how it's been documented how Canadian arms are falling in the hands of these private battalions that have neo-Nazi affiliations, or if not neo-Nazis themselves, okay? I mean, Germany should, you know, if it's good to get into this narrative here, it can play a positive role. But I mean, to say something is laughable in the same sentence or paragraph with genocide, that's a bad look, okay? Particularly from a given temple. I have to agree with you completely.
Yeah. Anyway, we have a super chat from Anta Dash. Thank you so much. Very kind of you. He said, I argued with one of my friends that Ukraine is not important. Ukraine is a corrupt and pointless country. My friend also said that we need NATO for the values of the West to spread. That's a position that, yeah, what's that? Yeah, that's it. Values. He puts values in quotes. It's a position, that many people in the West argue. Now, obviously, we can say Ukraine is not the embodiment of any kind of quote values unquote. We know about the illegal, violent coup that toppled the legal, legitimate government in 2014. We know about the various Nazi sympathizers who were involved in that. We know about the rehabilitation of Nazi collaborators in Ukraine. We know about the undemocratic practices, the repression of minorities, particularly use of languages. We know about the repression of the opposition. We have leading opposition figures that are either under house arrest or facing treason charges. So this is not, and the media, of course, suppression, extensive media suppression. This is no model of Western values, unless Western values today mean trampling people with horses in Ottawa.
Well, also, how can you use the word value when the coup government used its military against Ukrainians in the Donbass, 14,000 people? I don't think murdering civilians approaches using the word value. Also, to add to George's checklist, which was excellent, is that what about the Party of Regions? That was the largest party in Ukraine before the coup. What about a very substantial and vibrant Communist Party? Now, I know people in the West say, well, who cares about the Communist Party? Well, a lot of Ukrainians did, okay? That's their business, all right? So two of the biggest, most important parties was banned, okay? So they can't be part of the democratic process, all right? And also the property of those two parties, very large parties, a lot of assets, they were all confiscated and divvied out by all of their oligarchic friends. Oh, speaking of oligarchy, that's what runs the place. Ask Hunter Biden. So I really wish we can retire values when it comes to Ukraine, because it's a farce. All right. And it's really insulting to the people that suffer there. Okay. It really, the number of people that go around talking about values in Ukraine, I bet very few of them have ever been there. I've been there many, many times, and it's a beautiful place and a wonderful people.
No, that's exactly right. Of course, there's also something really obnoxiously wrong about the idea of spreading, quote, values, unquote. There's a stupid article in the New York Times today. That's kind of a redundancy. Stupid article in the New York Times. You don't even want to say that, by their columnist David Brooks, and he's bemoaning about the influence of Putin and Xi Jinping. People around the world are looking to Putin and Xi Jinping because they're authoritarians and they somehow embody traditional values. But the fact is that neither Putin nor Xi Jinping have any interest in spreading their system. I mean, this is not the Soviet Union. This is not what the Soviet Union was doing that. But the only people in the world today who are spreading their values, their civilization, and they want their influence is the West. And the fact is that there aren't many takers. Even in the West, I mean, we see, for instance, all this talk about, gay marriage, transgender issues and all that. There aren't really many takers even in the West. It's causing deep divisions in Western societies. We see it in Hungary. It's even in the United States. It's causing deep divisions. So you're spreading this around the world, and you insist on your right to spread this around the world when there aren't any takers. So, Putin isn't, he's not trying to impose anything on anyone, neither Xi Jinping. So, but it's only the West is doing this.
We did a podcast a few months ago, maybe even been a year ago. We do so many podcasts. Was it A.P. Taylor. He wrote a diplomatic history of
A.J.P. Taylor. Yeah.
And what is really remarkable about the book, it's about the diplomacy before the Second World War. Now, I remember this, but of course, George pointed it out to me, so I could remember it. And it was a dispassionate history of diplomacy, or the failure of diplomacy prior to the beginning of the Second World War. The reason why I bring this up, George, and this is obviously rhetorical, I mean, what does values have to do with geopolitics? When have they been fused together?
That's a very good point. That's an excellent point. Yeah.
When you look at the geopolitical, if we were to do a SWOT analysis of Chinese foreign policy, would ideology come in play at all? I mean, would that even be on the grid? No, it wouldn't be.
That's right. That's exactly right. And they make no attempt at this. I mean, we've talked about this many times before. That whenever you listen to Putin's comments, speeches, observations, he's always just simply saying, well, this is what works for us in Russia, but we don't want to be threatened from outside. There are real security concerns. That is all. He's not saying I want the world to imitate us. Never once have I heard him say anything that suggests, people around the world, they're looking to us, for inspiration. There may well be people who admire Putin, but he's not once has he ever acknowledged that or said that this was of any significance. Even at the time when this was made into a phony big issue in the United States, because Trump had said something like Putin is a strong leader, and everyone got hysterical about it. He never acknowledged it. He never just said. He just said, well, Trump is an interesting character. That's all. He never said, I am a strong leader. He's right.
Well, I mean, in Russian foreign policy, they have relations right now, very bad relations with the West. They claim to be democracies.
Right.
Israel, many people call it an apartheid-like state. Russia has relations with Israel. Saudi Arabia, which is doubtful even a state because it's a royal family. Russia has relations with them, and of course with China. I've gone through an entire spectrum there, George.
Right.
It's called geopolitics.
Right.
And I remember I really liked the phrase after the illegal coup in 2014. I saw in Russian media, I don't think it was an official description, but I came across the term official Kiev, which I thought was really kind of smart because there are people in power in Kiev. Okay, right. Now they may or may not be legitimate, but they do have the power. Okay, right. And if you want to have any kind of contact or even influence, you have to deal with people who have the power. That's the whole debate about dealing with the Taliban. You can recognize them without giving them legitimacy. See, this is so much more nuance, not this David Brooke over at the New York Times. There's no nuance there. It's all, it is such cheap propaganda at this point. And all they do is talk to their bubble. Do you think the average farmer in Kansas gives a hoot one way or another what kind of regime is in Kiev? I doubt it.
No, exactly right. And we have another super chat from Detroit Rock City. Nice to see you again, Detroit. Thank you so much. And Detroit says, U.S. is in dire need of a victory after Afghanistan. Yeah, I think that's fair. The problem there is that, the U.S. has been very good at fighting wars against countries that aren't able to fight back. I mean, that's a particular U.S. specialty. Haiti, Panama, Serbia, Iraq after 10 years of sanctions, and Afghanistan again, very, very, very backward place. It's not, you don't want to take on someone your own size. I mean, that's always a bad idea. So you go whack, whack, whack somebody who's much smaller than you. Fighting someone your own side, that's very problematic. And fighting a war against Russia is extremely problematic.
And the way the U.S. military has been rolled out over the last 30 years, particularly the last 20 years, it's on the war on terror, which doesn't mean really large conventional forces. It's a very different military. Russia never really missed a heartbeat, okay?
Right.
It formed its conventional military forces, and they are very substantial. And when they're given the word, they don't look back, George, okay? When they're given the word, they go.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. That's right. I think it's very interesting that on this day, when all these pompous blowhards are in Munich at the security conference, Russia did not attend. No official representative of Russia is in attendance. Putin is observing quite a major military exercise involving missiles. So he's sitting there in Moscow with Lukashenko by his side, observing these missile tests. That sends a message, which is, we're not messing around right now.
Yeah, well, I mean, George, let's give the juxtaposition for our viewers. So Putin is reviewing Russia's nuclear capacity, its nuclear arsenal with the state-of-the-art missiles. And then you have Stoltenberg like a chihuahua, and everyone knows I love chihuahuas, but like a chihuahua on speed dial, we are a defensive alliance. I mean, who do you take more seriously?
Right.
Yeah,
right. That's right. It's kind of the defensive thing was very strange because Johnson also kept defensive, and Putin has to understand that we're defensive. And Kamala Harris said, "Yeah, we're a defensive alliance. We're defensive." Now, the United States has never once fought a defensive war. I mean, the United States is always engaged in an aggressive war. It was always. It's like What was the United States defending? I mean, North Vietnam attacked the United States? I mean, it's like, is that what it was? Hanoi launched missiles against New York City.
Remember when Serbia attacked NATO, George?
Exactly. Boom! That's a missile landing in Brussels. Yeah, I mean, every single war it engages in is aggressive. And the whole idea that, we're defensive. I mean, they really do think that people take this sort of nonsense seriously. Now, maybe the Western public think, well, we're kind of defensive, because, the West doesn't like to think of itself as aggressive. But that's why, essentially, NATO is entirely a propaganda campaign. It is the whole thing is just public relations. You just churn out this stuff. Russia is an aggressor. Russia is threatening Ukraine. Ukraine is this plucky little country standing up, and we're all there defensively. And then you come along and tell the Russians that you've got to take our word for it, because we're just defensive. Yes, we've incorporated all these new states because that's part of our mission of creating a Europe whole and free and secure. So you're creating an alliance against Russia, and that's your definition of a Europe secure and free. Yeah, I mean, a Russian who reads Boris Johnson's speech will say, will be convinced this alliance, this is really driven against us. And, we need to do something about it now because they're not going to stop.
Well, one of the things about American foreign policy makers, I'll throw in the Brits too, they always say, but Peter, that was a long time ago. You remember, that's always that, it's the two phrases you hear, that was a long time ago. Okay, and something must be done. See, that is the that I've just bookended Western foreign policy.
Yes,
that was a long time ago, and something must be done.
That's right.
Ask the people of Libya. Is NATO a defensive alliance?
Yeah, exactly. That's the point. That they always say it was a long time ago. So you bring up Mossadegh. People like that buffoon. Bernie Sanders. We can talk a little bit about him later on, but I think at one of those debates, I think against Hillary Clinton in 2016, he brought up Mossadegh in the middle of a debate. It's so stupid. I mean, because who in the audience would know who the hell he's talking about? Mossadegh, it was almost 60 years ago. Only a few foreign policy specialists plus elderly lefties.
And they all blush, and those people blush. Keep going.
Yeah, that's right. So, it brings up Mossadegh, and but of course, people, even to the ones who actually know what he's talking about when he brings up Mossadegh, they'll say, yeah, but that was then. That was 1953. Yeah, Art Benz in Guatemala. Yeah, very bad. 1954. Allende 73. Yeah, terrible. Yeah. Well, we don't do those things anymore. Yeah, the Brazilian generals. That was in the 1960s. No. We don't. Shah of Iran. Yeah, okay, but that's all in the past. We don't do this. Yeah, we did support. Kissinger supported the Argentine generals. Yeah, but long time ago. And then you say, okay, now, what about supporting the coup in Honduras? That was under Hillary Clinton. That's not so long ago. We have evidence. What about Bush administration supported the overthrow of Chavez in Venezuela? There's no evidence of that. That's not so long ago. You said Gaddafi. Yeah.
I remember so well doing programs on Ukraine, and we had a Brookings Institution person, you know who I'm talking about.
Yes.
And he said, but Peter, the revolution of dignity, that was a long time ago. And it was like 9 months ago. Okay. Yes. He even said it was a long time ago, 9 months after the fact.
Right. Yes, exactly. That's right. That's in another one. So well, they're all that. So they always have this alibi, whenever you bring this up. Yeah, well, we don't do that kind of thing anymore. But of course, you do that kind of thing, and you're always going to go on doing that kind of thing. And then when it ends in a complete debacle, then you say, oh, well, mistakes were made. We just made mistakes. Vietnam, wrong war in the wrong place and the wrong time. Whatever the hell that means. But that was a cliche that went on in the 80s and 90s.
One of my stock reactions to all of that is that all the people, mistakes were made. The people that made those mistakes, all they do, George, is they shut down their air-conditioned office in the suburb of Washington, and then they move to another air-conditioned office, and then they start shop up all over again.
That's right. That's right. Because all of those people, you think of the guys who gave us Vietnam, all of those Kennedy Johnson people, they all did very, very well after they left office. McNamara, nice cushy gig, president of the World Bank, and then so he could pretend to be the friend of ordinary peasants everywhere else, even though he was an absolute disaster at the World Bank.
He knew a lot about peasants after his stint in Vietnam. Yeah.
Mac Bundy, I think he got a professorship at NYU, but he was also, I think, president of the Ford Foundation for a while before that. Or, people like Mac Bundy, they always get some very nice cushy job, somewhere. There's always a big fat cushy job waiting for me somewhere. So, Walt Rostow, he went to the Johnson Library in Austin, Texas. So they all did very well. I mean, there was never any punishment. And of course, a long time ago, but no one was punished for the Iraq debacle. They all landed on cushy jobs various places.
It's really amazing because the run up to the war, they were all experts on Iraq. It's really amazing, Right. I say it's amazing because these same people are on cable now and they're experts on Russia. Right. These are very versatile thinkers. Okay,
right.
They got that wrong and they're getting this wrong. Okay. I mean, everybody, when you promote war, you fail upward always. Yes. It's almost a law of physics.
Yes, that it is a law of physics because that's where the money is. I mean, that's it. That's where the money is. That's where the consultants are. That's where the arms contractors are. That's where all the security guys are. The ones who are selling all kinds of security hardware. Absolutely, that's where the money is.
And one of the things is that plebs like us, we worry about inflation. But see, this group of people, they generate threat inflation. They like that kind of inflation. Exactly. Everything is a threat. I'll give you a classic, the missile gap. There was never no such thing. There was never a missile gap. Okay.
Right.
And what did they do? They said there was a missile gap. Oh, it created threat inflation, and then you had to spend more money on it. It happens every single time. So, it's a threat. We have to spend money on it. Look, the U.S. economy is in very shaky shape, but 800 billion, George, Pentagon always gets paid first.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. So the missile gap, of course, helped trigger the massive increase in military spending in the Kennedy years, and of course the big missile buildup under the Kennedy administration. And then of course the Soviets started catching up with that. But it's funny because I was thinking about that today, the missile gap, and so when Khrushchev shot down the U-2 spy plane, that's in a way, I think that's a kind of a model for what the Russians may be thinking about in terms of this military technical measures. Because remember, Khrushchev shot it down. So, that's a risky venture, boom, down it went. So, even though he knew the Americans wouldn't like it, but he shot it down. He could have ended up in killing the pilot. The pilot, Gary Powers, wasn't killed and was eventually exchanged with some Soviet spies in the United States. But nonetheless, that was the Khrushchev saw this as a serious security threat, largely because I think the Americans would know that the Soviets were had nowhere near the number of missiles that the Americans had. So, I mean, that's why Khrushchev was so furious about the U-2 spy flights, particularly as Eisenhower told him there would be no more U-2 spy flights, and Eisenhower had broken his word. So there's a model. The other model I was thinking of is, again, the Soviet Union shot down the Korean airliner. Now, admittedly, they didn't know, we assume they didn't know that the Korean airliner was a civilian airliner. Nonetheless, they knew this was an American spy, at least an American spy plane. The Korean airliner may have been involved in spying on a spying mission because it had drifted so far off course over Soviet territory. Nonetheless, they shot it down. And so, we always assume, that, the Russians, they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do anything provocative. Yeah, I mean, when their security is at stake, they do it. And it's on American planes and they shoot it down. So, something like this may be in the works.
A trivia question. How did Gary Powers die?
I don't know. That's a very good question.
I remember it. I remember it very well. I was living in Southern California. I was a high school student. Gary Powers, the pilot that was shot, I mean, virtually in space. I mean, the Soviets got really lucky hitting that thing. Okay, they really did. So Gary Powers, he parachutes out. He should have committed suicide. That was the rules. He wasn't supposed to be caught. Okay, and so anyway, he's exchanged. Okay, so what did Gary Powers end up doing? He ended up reporting the weather for a Southern California local television station. He was in the helicopter flying. It's Gary Powers in the sky. And he would tell us about traffic, what was going on with the traffic. And his helicopter hit a power line and it killed him. So he went from like 300 feet. He didn't survive that, but he survived something from 35,000 feet in the sky. Very strange story for Gary Powers, okay? But I can remember, we have Gary Powers in the sky, okay? So that's
wow. That is interesting, because I hadn't really thought about it because I kind of assumed he's dead now, but I didn't know that. He obviously, that's a long time ago that he died. So yeah,
I think it was like the early 80s. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Well.
I guess his Air Force pension didn't work out too well.
Well, that's interesting. Again, the American government didn't treat him particularly well. Obviously, they exchanged him, but they didn't treat him. But I probably, as you say, they expected him to commit suicide, and he didn't do it, which means that they may have got information out of him.
Look, you guys. Interrogation works. You can get a lot of information from people, okay? If you do it legitimately, if you're really, if you're just trying to torture someone for the fun of it, you're going to hear anything you want. But most people crack. I know Hollywood tells you differently.
Oh, yeah, of course, of course, yeah, of course, yeah, yeah. But I mean, I remember we always talk about Dr. Strangelove, and you remember when
I was just thinking about
that. He said when basically it's over, the U.S. government had now captured that base, the air base, and then suddenly General Jack D. Ripper tells Group Captain Mandrake that I think they're going to be giving me a good working over very shortly. And Mandrake said, yes, I think there's a very good chance of that happening. And he said, I don't know if I can stand torture. Well, the truth is, no one can. So why don't you just, forget about the torture, just tell me what the code is. So yeah, of course, no one can stand torture.
Kubrick got in so much trouble with the intelligence community. The Pentagon was furious with him, and because one of the things that happened when remember in the film you see inside the cabin where all of them are sitting,
yes,
and all of the technology.
Yeah.
They were furious. How did you figure? Because it was so close to reality, and there must be a leak here. I mean, how did he figure this out? Okay, right. I don't know what the end story of that there, but I mean, right. Dr. Strangelove was not a film. He was attacked in the media as being unpatriotic, pro-Soviet, pro-communist, the usual things. Okay, yeah. It's one of the greatest films ever made. It's maybe the greatest political film ever made.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. Absolutely, I agree. It missed out on all the Oscars that year because of My Fair Lady, which is a good film. I mean, but nonetheless, this was obviously, Dr. Strangelove was a masterpiece. Whereas My Fair Lady, it's the kind of thing that Americans do very well. They do these musicals, great, but nothing special.
Yeah, but see, I mean, one of the reasons why Charlie Chaplin was very, very popular because he punched up. He always punched up. And J. Edgar Hoover hated Charlie Chaplin for doing that. As a matter of fact, he hounded him out of the country. He ended up living in Switzerland. Yep. He came back for one visit to get a lifetime award for the Oscars when Oscars meant something. Right. But he was hounded out, and that's another thing with Kubrick. I mean, he punched up, and authorities don't like that. Okay, no. And he did it. I mean, I mentioned Charlie Chaplin, but Kubrick was a genius, and so he always went right up to, because you can't, where parody ends and criticism starts. He was the master of playing that line back and forth, back and forth.
Right. No. I think that's right. It's a remarkable kind of political film in that it was also a very sophisticated political film. I mean, in order to understand it, you had to know quite a bit about politics. You had to know quite a bit about nuclear strategy, and it was you couldn't really make that today because you just don't have that base of knowledge that you can assume on the part of the public, that the public would actually be able to follow what's going on here. So you have to have much more of a good guys, bad guys thing, rather than this which was a kind of a black comedy in that there are no good guys. I mean, everybody's
and the world ends.
The world ends.
And the world ends.
The world ends in a very kind of amusing, very kind of sardonic way, because we see all the mushroom clouds, and then we have Vera Lynn singing, "We'll meet again." Very, very powerful ending, because again, it's because the song is so inappropriate to what you're actually seeing on the screen.
He could have done a sequel. I really wanted to know what happened in those mine shafts, George.
The mine shafts. That's right. Anyway.
One of my favorite scenes there when they're in the war room and everything's going to hell in a handbasket, and there's Soviet ambassadors there and they have this buffet. There's food.
That's right, exactly. That's right. Well, that's when they they have that fight, which is one of the great lines ever. It's become a kind of iconic line, which is when he and General Turgidson because the Soviet ambassador starts taking pictures of the map on the wall, and they said, "Gentlemen, I've never seen such behavior in the war room."
What was it that George C. Scott was playing the general, and the president, Peter Sutherland, says, "So can it get through?" He says, "Oh, can this baby, he can fly." He's like 150 feet off the ground, and then he suddenly realizes, yeah, it can work.
Yeah, that was indeed a classic. Exactly. Yeah. Can he get through? Can he get through? And then it suddenly dawns on him.
Yep, it can get through.
Let's change the subject. We have a super chat from Ryan McDonald, who says, "Will an American labor trucker protest manifest?" I don't know. I mean, I think that given the repression that's going on now in Canada, I think some repression of the same kind will almost certainly be manifest here. We know what the Biden administration is about. So I think that it might, I think it would lead to any kind of discourage people from going down that path. Anyway, what do you think, Peter?
I think so too. And Trudeau is giving a preamble of what to expect. When you go after somebody's wallet, that's pretty serious business here. Okay. Yeah. And what they're doing with Bitcoin and these cryptocurrencies and things like that, that's really, really scary. And they talked a lot about it's easier to go after when you're in the conventional banking system. It's even easier because you don't need the Justice Department to make a request. Bank of America will do it for them. And this is the insanity of this all right now. But we'll see. I mean, there's a cadre of people that are so angry, and I think we have to take a step back, and you and I will talk about this tomorrow with thumbs up and thumbs down, is that there are certain segments of society when they raise their voice and lift their head, they're instantly deemed as being enemies of the state. Okay. Yeah. Black Lives Matter ran rampant, Antifa ran rampant in 2020. Right. And and when average working people that are actually necessary, how many people in the Black Lives Matter movement are actually socially necessary? Okay, not truck drivers. Yeah, okay, yeah.
But that's it, because Black Lives Matter and Antifa were the ground troops, the militia of the kind of the liberal elites, the Zuckerbergs and the Democratic Party. So they were in approval. They approved of this violence. The truckers, and again, the people in January the 6th, they didn't use any kind of violence. Like on January the 6th, I mean, the only violence that we saw was the police violence, or at least it looks now increasingly as the violence on the part of the January 6th people was in response to the police, who kind of launched a ridiculous overreaction.
I guess that's why we're not going to see the 14,000 hours of tape, George.
Exactly. So that that's the sort of the good violence, and this is the violence that we absolutely. So it's clear that as far as the truckers are concerned, the Biden administration would just simply go after them. I mean, they're going to throw, we've seen what they did to the January 6th people. You can just keep them in prison. I mean, there's still people, I think it was about 50 people who are still in prison. This is now, 14 months after January the 6th. They still have not been convicted of anything. They're just sitting there rotting in this jail in DC. So these truckers have to think about, that's what's heading for them. And as you say, there's the issue of going after your bank account. I mean, do you want your bank account?
Well, I don't. I could be corrected here, but I've never heard of a truck driver actually being a member of the 1%. Okay, no. And these people here, these truck drivers, they threaten very serious capital, and so so I don't care, Republican, Democrat, and you can all do the culture war stuff you want, but when money is at stake, the state will step in, and they will step in on your neck hard.
Right. Yeah, no, that's right. Anyway, we have a super chat from Al QK. Thank you so much, Al. And Al says, Russian media reporting recently that a Ukrainian politician and, quote, ex-deputy, unquote, of some sort, says Kiev is preparing a Croatian-style take-back of Donbass. Also, the SBU, together local Nazis, will kill pro-Rus opposition. So I think this is a reference to Operation Storm in 1995, when the Croatian army, led by Tudjman, but having been now armed heavily by the United States and Germany, launched an offensive against the Serb kind of held areas within Croatia. These were the sort of autonomous regions in which the Serbs lived, because the Serbs just didn't accept the independent Croatia. So this was an offensive mounted by the Croatian government, and they drove out. I mean, who knows, about 100,000, 150,000 Serbs were driven out of Croatia. This was ethnic cleansing by any definition of the word. However, NATO, Germany, the United States, clapping their hands with glee, Serbs them right. They all were very, very excited by this. And I do think that, Kiev would love to do something like this, because again, even at that time, there was a kind of phony baloney negotiations taking place, which was just simply a kind of a fig leaf, because the Americans and the Croatians were already planning this offensive, but they were pretending to go through a kind of negotiating process. They didn't want to negotiate anything. So here, the problem that Kiev has, and probably the United States has, is that they're dealing with Russia now, not Serbia. Serbia decided not to intervene in Croatia and basically then start a full-scale war against Croatia. And so Serbia just stood back and let their own nationals be driven out. Russia would not behave in the same way. So that's why I don't think that it would play itself. I mean, there may well be people who think in those terms, but I don't think it's going to play itself out in the way it played itself out in Operation Storm.
All the more so, George, is because, again, Western audiences are not made aware of this, but the ethnic Russians living in the Donbass, that is a intense domestic political issue in Russia, okay? You can't say these are other people. So people we don't know about and far away. No one can make that claim, okay? And so if that kind of type of operation is going to be attempted, the organizers are going to be sorely disappointed, okay? But then again, that's what they want. They want an intervention. They want to kill civilians to prompt an intervention, and then say, look, see? Aggressors, okay? Right. As we are speaking right now, everyone, the Donbass is experiencing physical violence, okay? As we speak right now, okay? There is, it looks like there was a gas pipeline that was attacked. You can find the pictures on Twitter. It looks like there was some kind of truck bombing, and civilians are being shipped now to Rostov in Russia because these militias, and I stress militias, that the Ukrainian government is supporting. A lot of them are irregulars. The chain of command is very, very loose. Some of these people are there because they like to kill people. And I'm not saying that flippantly. They like it, okay? And they're given license to do it. Go ahead. And they're using NATO equipment, particularly Canada.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And the Russian government yesterday provided emergency funds for evacuees. In other words, the provincial government in Rostov will get emergency funds from the central government to house evacuees. So clearly the Russian government is taking this very seriously. And so, yeah, I mean, something, this thing could easily escalate. And there's no question that there are people in Ukraine that very much, all these people like Johnson and Harris and Biden and Blinken, they want to provoke this Russian intervention. Russia doesn't want to intervene But there may come a point at which it has no choice, and then it just has to move in.
Technical military measures. That's intentionally ambiguous, everybody. Okay.
Right.
Like, oh, an arms depot blew up. Who knew? Who knew? Okay. A very sophisticated electronic warfare. Basically blanking out, shutting down any kind of communication. A lot of things can happen. There's a lot of different things in play right here. The last thing that Russia wants to do is to send its own troops. Now, having said that, the military forces in Donetsk and Lugansk, they are very well organized. They've been waiting for this. They've been, and it's been ongoing for 8 years. Right. Okay, and now the intensity has increased, so they are prepared. And as we saw in 2014, 2015, if necessary, Russia will give a very strong hand of help, if you know what I mean.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's right. So Al QK says, to clarify, the ex-deputy was specifically referring to dissidents in the West Ukraine, Kiev areas, who will be targeted, bloggers, politicians, journalists, and such. I'm not exactly sure.
Who's doing the targeting?
That's exactly my question. Targeted by whom? Because I thought the idea was that it was Kiev would launch this.
I read this on Zero Hedge today. They're saying that the Russians are going to be targeting these people. Okay.
Right. Yeah, because that's what we were talking about this the other day. Blinken was suggesting this. Oh, they're going to be targeting, but that there were, and it sounded like Russians are going to carry out mass executions. They're just going to start shooting people. But I don't fully understand why would they start executing or killing bloggers, politicians, journalists. I don't get that. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Russia has no interest at all.
Right.
Who's running Ukraine?
Exactly.
Ukraine's problems are Ukraine's problems. Okay. Exactly. So if you got problems with bloggers and whatever a dissident is in Ukraine, I have no idea.
I have no idea either. Yeah.
Russia doesn't care. It doesn't want NATO military hardware on its border. That's it. And don't kill civilians in the Donbass. It's pretty much the long and short of it.
That's right, and this is something we've talked about before, which is they want to fashion the Cold War thing. Oh, remember what they did? Soviets marched into Hungary in '56, Czechoslovakia '68. But those were different because those were regime change operations. They didn't want Imre Nagy in charge in Hungary anymore. They wanted to install a different government, which is what they did, and they arrested the leaders in '56, and they arrested the leaders in '68. They flew them all to Moscow and essentially wanted a regime change. They're not interested in a regime change. I mean, that's the whole point. They don't care about who's running things in Kiev. That's why this invasion idea just makes no sense. I mean, if you have an invasion, then what's the military objective? What are you trying to achieve? In '56 and '68, it was clear what the Soviets were trying to achieve. This doesn't make any sense.
There was a military objective, there was a political objective, and there was an ideological objective.
Exactly. Yeah.
In this case, none of them apply.
Right. Yeah, exactly. That's right. So Harry Smith asked the super chat, will they partition Ukraine? It sure looks so. Well, I think that if there is an offensive, a serious offensive against the Donbass, and then that offensive ends, then I do think that issue that we were talking about the Duma demanding recognition for the independence of the Donetsk and Lugansk, I think that will go into operation. Because I think at that point the Russians will say, Putin will say, enough. You obviously have no intention of reintegrating this in a way which is acceptable to these people. We're just going to recognize their independence. So I think that could well be the consequence. And it's very problematic in all sorts of ways, but in terms of international law. But that may well be the consequence of any kind of an offensive.
Well, also, everyone's crystal ball is a bit foggy when you go thus far into the future. However, I think the question is very good because the question used the word partition. I think we can play with that a little bit you have to understand is that in the eastern part of Ukraine and the Donbass, technically, and Russia recognizes it as part of Ukraine, is that the further west you go, the more mixed the populations are. Right. And so the Donbass has been de facto outside of Kiev's rule since 2014. Okay, Crimea is gone forever. It's off the table. It's gone. Okay, but see, I'll go all the way up to Kharkov, for example. Now that's largely a Russian population, and and people say, the Ukrainians are going to fight in there. I don't think so. I really don't. Okay, and a lot of people will say, look, the Donbass left, Crimea left. Why don't we leave too? Okay, I mean, they don't let us speak our language, or we have a different religious faith. I mean, they've been pushing this mono-Ukrainianization policy on us now for 8 years. We don't really want to be part of it. It's not our thing. Anyway, we lived it together peacefully for a very long time. What, why all this? And I think a lot of people say, well, let's just vote with our feet.
Right, but I don't think that the other regions would be able to separate, because I think Ukraine would use force against them, and this time Russia would not intervene on their
but who would be the occupier, George? See, that's my point. Okay?
Right, but I think, in other words, now in the case of the Donetsk and Lugansk, I think then the Russians will say, okay, we recognize them. But they're not going to do it for the Hungarians. I mean, if the Hungarians say, "Hey, we don't stinking like it here," either. But that no one's going to do anything.
Taking Russia out of the equation here, what I'm just saying is that it will a cascade effect could happen inside of Ukraine, because you watch the state starting to crumble. And if a decision is going to be made, well, we're going to make a decision that's good for us. Okay, Kiev doesn't seem to have any particular interest in us at all. What I'm just saying is that the turmoil within Ukraine will become more and more intense because the Galician definition of Ukraine and what it means to be Ukrainian is very alien in the very center of the country.
Right, yeah. But I think in this case, I think they would be able to use force against.
Oh yeah,
them. I mean, absolutely. They would do it, and presumably, I think Russians would just simply shrug their shoulders, and say, okay,
I agree.
Yeah. I agree. But it's clear that with everything that what Kiev is saying and what Kiev's enablers are saying, is that they're not going to make any attempt. I mean, they're making no attempt whatsoever to reintegrate the Donbass. I mean, how the hell do they think it's going to happen? You're saying you're not even going to negotiate with their representatives. So, I mean, France. I mean, when at the UN Security Council meeting, when the ambassador of Ukraine said, well, we're not even going to legitimize these people by talking to them, and the French representative just sits there, says nothing. Well, so what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to be overseeing the implementation of Minsk, and this guy has just said he isn't going to negotiate with the representatives, even though that's what it says, explicitly says in black and white, you're supposed to do in Minsk. Well, that's it. Then there's nothing. What are we going to be talking about? And this is something that you kind of wonder. I mean, today there was another phone conversation between the French Foreign Minister Le Drian and Lavrov, and then tomorrow I think there's going to be another phone conversation with Putin and Macron. And you kind of, what's there to talk about? I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, you're just saying the same thing. I mean, because if you go by the readout from Lavrov, it sounds like he's making the same point over and over again. I mean, how many times can you do it? What was the point of this phone conversation?
Yeah, well, I think Lavrov and Putin are basically saying, if you call, we're not picking up the charges. I mean, if you want to pay for it, it's a long distance call here. I mean, you don't have money for this, okay?
Well, I think that's right, because all of these calls are always initiated from the Western side. And so I think they're